Okay, I'm back with you now, and we're in part one of our new series entitled The QME's Championship Playbook. And we're beginning with part one, which is entitled The Preparatory Secrets of the Very Best Qualified Medical Evaluators. And before we get into that, let me just say a couple things. The whole purpose of this program is to improve our final product. You know, it's our final product, which is our QME report, which is what represents us out in the community. It's what represents us to the parties. Many times, as you know, we never ever meet claims administrators. We never ever meet applicant attorneys. We never ever meet the workers' compensation judges. We never have an opportunity to meet these parties, but these parties come to know us through our final product. And we want the parties to be impressed with our work and with us and with our final product. And so the whole purpose of this program is to help us create reports, the end product, the final product, that is credible, that is authoritative, that is definitive, and that is persuasive. So let's begin today's discussion with just a quote, a couple of definitions about persuasiveness and persuasion. So persuasion is an adjective. Persuasive is an adjective. It means tending to persuade or to use persuasion. Well, that uses the very word in the definition, so let's continue with some more definitions. Persuasive means the ability to cause people to believe or to do something. The ability to cause people to believe something or to do something. It's the influence of beliefs, attitudes, intentions, motivations, or behaviors. Persuasion is a process aimed at changing a person's or a group's attitudes or behavior towards some event, some idea, some object, or some other person or persons by using written or spoken words to convey information, feelings, or reasoning, or a combination of them. And in our qualified medical evaluation reports, we use the written word to persuade. We use the spoken word to persuade at deposition. So here we're talking about our QME reports through the employment of written words. And a Chinese proverb gives us great direction. It says, "The tongue can paint what the eye cannot see." And doesn't that exactly apply to our qualified medical evaluations, where we have the opportunity to see face to face the examinee, a person who the other parties may never see. So we use words to paint the picture and to give the reader of our report the image of what it is that we're experiencing. The image of the examinee in the interview process, the image of the examinee throughout the physical examination process. Through the use of your written words, you can persuade the reader of your report to your opinions and conclusions by painting the picture for them to see in their mind's eye. And when they're done reading your report, they can see the examinee perform the physical examination maneuvers almost as if they were there in person. And that's the power of creating persuasion in our reports. And I have dozens and dozens of ideas to share with you with that as our final objective. So we're going to begin with the preparatory secrets of the very best qualified medical evaluators. And the preparation for the QME evaluation begins immediately after you receive the phone call for an appointment. So after you've gone through the administrative process of sending out the appointment notification form and notifying all the parties and all of that upfront administration, then the doctor's preparation process can begin. Now, a couple quotes about preparation. The first one comes from Alexander Graham Bell. He said, "Before anything else, preparation is the key to success, and the very best qualified medical evaluators are meticulous in their preparation for an upcoming evaluation." Wouldn't a world champion golfer be perfectly prepared for an upcoming tournament? Wouldn't a world-class tennis player do many steps in preparation for Wimbledon, for the French Open, for the Australian Open? Don't they prepare according to an exact plan? Well, guess what? The very best qualified medical evaluators have an exact preparatory process in the weeks and days leading up to an upcoming evaluation. Robert Schuller, the great preacher, great California preacher, said that spectacular achievement is always preceded by unspectacular preparation. That's exactly what we're after. We're after a spectacular achievement, which is a brilliant, meticulous, and perfect QME report. That's our spectacular achievement. It's going to be preceded by the unspectacular preparation, so that by the time you get to the face-to-face evaluation, every single duck is in a row, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and the stage is set for a spectacular final product, which is your QME report. So I want you to imagine that you're 2 weeks out from your upcoming evaluation. You're 2 weeks out. Okay? This is when you want to start ramping up for the evaluation. And there's several steps that you can begin even 2 weeks out from the evaluation that will set the stage for a fabulous encounter. So these aren't all the steps that are involved in the preparation before the face-to-face meeting, but I want to give you some of the very most important that will make a dramatic impact on your case. So at 2 weeks out, you want to start to begin to review the available materials that you have. Now, you may not have all of the materials, especially since many of these insurance companies get the medical records and cover letters to us within minutes of our evaluation, or if we're lucky, a day before the evaluation or 2 days. It's rare that any of these claims administrators have their acts so together that we get our materials early. But at 2 weeks out, you want to start to begin the materials that you do have available. And that may only be simply the intake form that your secretary filled out when the applicant called, or when the applicant attorney called, or whoever called. It may only be that document, but you want to start to review what it is that you do have. And what you want to start becoming interested for are, number one, cover letters, and number two, the medical records. So with regards to cover letters, couple words. We're going to be expecting cover letters at least from the claims administrator, and in those cases that involve represented injured workers, we're going to be expecting cover letters from the applicant attorney and from the defense attorney. Now, cover letters are critical. I cannot overemphasize the importance of cover letters. It's up to you to make sure that you get the cover letters. Don't just sit there twiddling your thumbs up until the date of the evaluation waiting for some instruction as to the scope of this evaluation. It's up to you to take responsibility to get the cover letters. So at 2 weeks out, you start probing for the cover letters. Where's the cover letters? You ask your secretary, do we have the cover letters? No, we don't have the cover letters. Okay, then call for the cover letters. You call the claims administrator for a cover letter. You call the applicant attorney for a cover letter. You call the defense attorney for a cover letter. Now, the cover letters are critical because the cover letters are what establish the scope of the evaluation for us. The cover letters tell us the involved body parts. They tell us the dispute of the case, whether it be a compensability dispute or a permanent impairment dispute or whatever. We get that information from the cover letter. So the cover letters help us to determine the issues that are driving the evaluation. Now, there's 3 labor codes under which qualified medical evaluations are called. Labor Code 4060, the compensability exam. Labor Code 4061, the dispute over permanent disability or permanent impairment exam. And then 4062, those Other disputed issues such as work restrictions, temporary disability, apportionment, etc. are called for under Labor Code 4062. So it's important for you to determine under which of the labor codes you're doing this evaluation. In other words, what are the issues driving the evaluation? If it's a compensability issue, that'll be driven under Labor Code 4060. You need to know that. You need to know that because the type of the labor code under which you're operating determines the type of evaluation that you'll be doing. The evaluation under Labor Code 4060 for compensability is much different than the evaluation that you would do under 4061. So you need to know the scope of the evaluation, and that comes from the cover letters. Also, the body parts involved comes from the cover letters. Now, once you determine the issues involved in the evaluation, that will give you some idea as to the complexity of the evaluation. By complexity, I'm referring to which medical legal billing code, which of the ML codes you'll be billing under for this particular evaluation. The complexity under which you're going to be billing comes from the issues involved in the evaluation. The issues involved in the evaluation are revealed to us in the cover letters. So it's imperative that you get cover letters, and it's imperative that you yourself personally take responsibility for making sure that you have in your hand the cover letter 2 weeks out, certainly no later than 1 week out. Okay? So as you approach the evaluation, the intensity of your demand for cover letters must increase until you get the cover letters. Okay? Now, some of the other materials that may be available at this time include the medical records. Sometimes one of these parties has their acts so well together that we get the medical records even 2 weeks out from the evaluation. When that happens, it's great because then we have some time to work with it and there's no rush and no urgency. And you're going to want to review the medical records, and we'll talk more about review of records here in just a couple sessions. But you're going to want to review the medical records to find out the history of the case as it's documented by medical experts, doctors. Okay, the medical records tells you about the history. It tells you about the work restrictions that they're operating under. It tells you about the mechanism of injury. The medical records will give you information regarding periods of total temporary disability. Will tell you information as to how the examinee has responded or failed to respond to treatment up to this point in time. The medical records is where you're going to glean the preponderance greater than 51% of the information, factual information related to the case. The other portion of the information upon which you rely will include the applicant's testimony and all of your examination and diagnostic study findings, but the bulk of the history is going to come from the medical records. And you want to be fluent in the medical records on the date of your face-to-face evaluation. Fluent. By fluent, I mean you should be able to cite doctors, you should be able to cite dates, you should be able to cite results of diagnostic studies. You should be more fluent with the history through the medical records than the examinee is through his own memory. Okay, and that's not that hard to do because he doesn't have access to the medical records. But you do. So the medical records are critical. You must beg, borrow, and steal to get the medical records 2 weeks out from the evaluation. You begin this 2 weeks out, and you beg for these medical records like every other day, either by fax, either on disc, either by FedEx, by U.S. mail in paper format, whatever it takes. You get the medical records, and you take full responsibility for getting the medical records. Now, additionally, as regards to the complexity of your evaluation, the medical records contribute to your ML billing code under CCR 9795. So the records are so critical that their importance cannot be overstated for many, many, many reasons. So you can consider the medical records to be the hub of the wheel of your overall evaluation. They're central pieces of information, central data. So beg, borrow, and steal for the medical records in the days approaching the evaluation. Some of the other information that you may have available to you 2 weeks out from the evaluation could be diagnostic studies, or at least you could be aware that there are diagnostic studies that have been taken up until your evaluation. So you get the results of diagnostic studies, of course, through the medical records, and you should be fluent with those. And then also you may find evidence in the medical records that those diagnostic studies are easily obtainable. They're easily obtainable at least by having the examinee go out, get those records, get those images, get those CDs, whatever, get those plain films, and bring those to the evaluation at the time of your evaluation. So if you're aware of diagnostic studies and they're relevant to your evaluation, in other words, you want to see the images yourself, not just read the medical radiologist or the experts or the specialist's report or his opinion of the findings. You want to see those findings for yourself, then you can request that the examinee bring those to the evaluation. And usually the examinee, most examinees are very cooperative on this. They'll go out of their way to get those studies for you. If they're not available that way, or I should say another way that the records may be available to you is if you belong to any physician online portals for some of the larger imaging facilities throughout the state of California. I myself am on several imaging portals, the physicians online imaging portals for large groups of imaging facilities that I use for my diagnostic studies depending upon where my evaluation is. I'm on several of those. I'm not on every single one, but the largest ones I am on. So there's a good chance if the medical records show that the examinee had x-ray studies at, I'm just making this up, a place like NorCal Imaging or Sacramento MRI or San Jose Open MRI, or I'm just making these names up. If you recognize those and you realize that you're on those physician portals, you may have access to those images through your own online imaging portal privileges. So that's another thing that you want to start to review and start to accumulate and start to accelerate your preparation towards obtaining, in whatever manner possible, the diagnostic studies. Finally, some of the preparatory procedures in the days and weeks before your evaluation, including making necessary calls to retrieve any of those missing items. So as we talked about already, as you approach the day of the evaluation, if you're missing any of these items, such as cover letters, such as medical records, such as diagnostic studies, you ramp up your procedures to make sure that by the date of the evaluation, none of these are missing. That you have everything that's necessary. So part of the preparation of the very best evaluators is to review the materials that are available to you at the time. We're talking about like 2 weeks out from the evaluation. To review those materials and shore up and make sure that you have everything that you need and want that will allow you to resolve the disputed issues in the case and that will allow you to bill under the appropriate complexity factors under the ML codes, is to make sure that you have all those materials going into the evaluation. Okay? Now, in just a moment, we're going to talk about the next set of preparatory secrets of the very best qualified medical evaluators. Again, this is in the time period leading up to the evaluation, perhaps 2 weeks out, involves setting up your QME template in your report writing software, or preparing your report as a template, and then also preparing for the entirety of the face-to-face evaluation. Okay, so that begins by work with the template, and then work with your template will lead you naturally into preparing everything, including the interview process and procedure, necessary questionnaires, symptom questionnaires, the necessary physical examination procedures from start to finish, ordering diagnostic studies, whatever may be necessary. So there's preparation that is involved with that in order to pull that off brilliantly. I want to share with you how the very best evaluators do that, beginning with how they set up their QME template. So look forward to being back with you here in just a couple minutes as we continue with our new program entitled the QME's Championship Playbook. So I'll be back with you here very shortly.